Coach Tony, Wrestling Podium Performance, and today is part 3 in our mini-series on shin splints and how to beat them. In parts 1 and 2, we covered the anatomy and the common causes of shin splints. Today, we're going to be looking into commonly misdiagnosed medical issues that are diagnosed as shin splints, but actually aren't. The first one we're going to go into is compartment syndrome. So this is, as the name suggests, has to do with the anterior compartment of the lower leg, where the anterior tibialis muscle is actually located. So as the name suggests, it has to do with pressure in that compartment. So if there's an increase or a chronic excess pressure here, you end up with shin splints. The issue with it is that it gets called shin splints because in compartment syndrome, the pain manifests in the same place, along the same, and it also has a lot of the same symptoms as well. So what we can take a look at when it comes to compartment syndrome are the 5 Ps. We have pain, pallor, pulselessness, paresthesia, and paralysis. So pallor is just a loss of color. Paresthesia is that numbing feeling that you get. Pulselessness, that's when, not necessarily that there's no blood flow coming in, but that is very hard to find the pulse in the area. And finally, paralysis, which is loss of function. This is the worst of all of them. So each of these can actually be present not just in the anterior compartment or in the front of the leg, but it can also manifest all the way down through your foot. The second big thing to take a look at when it comes to compartment syndrome is sometimes it can be simply rectified just with some physiotherapy, good manual therapy, and rest. The issue is the longer it goes misdiagnosed, the more severe it becomes. Just think about any medical issue. The longer it goes without being treated, the worse outcome that can happen. And the actual worst outcome here that typically happens is that you can actually require amputation. One of the fastest and easiest ways to rectify compartment syndrome is with a surgical intervention. Now, it's not excessively invasive. A lot of times it just requires an incision to allow some of that pressure out. The recovery time can be anywhere from a couple of weeks to maybe a month or 2, which is a lot less time than is required for, say, amputation, which you never truly fully recover from. The second medical issue that's commonly diagnosed as a shin splint, but really isn't, is stress fractures. These seem to be becoming much more common today, in particularly in female athletes being diagnosed with shin splints or stress fractures. A lot of times a stress fracture gets diagnosed after a bone scan. One of the easy tests that you can actually do for this, as weird as it sounds, is utilizing a tuning fork that someone who would tune a piano, for example, and putting it right at the base of your heel or along the bone, hammering it with not like your regular industrial hammer or sledgehammer, but just with a tuning hammer, a small little, basically you could even use a spoon. You just hit it, cause the vibration, and if there's some severe pain that all of a sudden happens in the bone, there's a good chance that you may have a stress fracture. One of the biggest causes of stress fractures is doing far too much volume for too long of a time without adequate recovery time and inadequate digestive intake. So you're not eating enough to recover, you're not taking enough time to recover, and you're doing too much work. The reason I said before that it's becoming increasingly common and even more common among female athletes is, as I covered in a previous video, male coaches putting too much of a focus on the scale number as opposed to body composition or performance, other key performance indicators for the athlete. So they run them into the ground, put them on a hard restrictive diet, and then 2-3 months later, we wonder why the female athlete is injured. So stress fractures, I'll typically blame a coach for a stress fracture. Our third misdiagnosis is thrombosis. So this is typically clotting of arteries or veins, blood vessels, a little deeper down. And it can be pretty hard to actually detect. You actually have to go and get a medical professional, doctor, radiology. You need to get imaging done to actually take a look and see if there is clotting going on. And the reason this can be so catastrophic is anytime you have clotting, you run the risk of strokes and heart attacks, any kind of cardiac issues start to arise from this. Causes of thrombosis are multifactorial. It can be simply just genetic, it can be dietary, it can be lifestyle, it could be a previous injury that you've had where you've had a severe trauma or an impact to the lower leg, for example. And although everything seemed fine, something was pinched off in there, either due to scar tissue formation or just the impact itself caused something not to quite work as well. That's why thrombosis can be quite an issue. And when that clot lasts for too long and then all of a sudden your pulse launches that clot upwards, that's when it can lead into a stroke, it can lead into other medical issues, all the way up to and including, sorry to say, a loss of life due to thrombosis. That's why getting the proper diagnosis is so critical. And our final misdiagnosed medical issue that can occur and be called a shin splint, while exceptionally rare, there are certain forms of malignant tumors or cancers that can form on bones. So if you notice that there's a malformation of the bone, like there's this weird bump on the bone that just never seems to go away, it's soft, the bone doesn't really have the same strength that it used to have, you're prone to pain, any kind of impact really hurts, it would be a good idea to get checked. I'm not saying all of these to be alarmist about shin splints. The reason for this specific video is I've had several athletes in the past who have been told by their physios, whether it was at school or otherwise, that, oh, you just have shin splints. And it turned out that it was, in one person's case, it was thrombosis that they had from a car accident when they were younger. Potentially, I can't actually say for sure. And another two were they actually had compartment syndrome that was becoming increasingly more severe. One of them now plays professional soccer football in Europe, whereas when the person was still in university, a lot of times was regulated to having to lose time on the field because of pain. So getting the proper diagnosis, if you are an athlete, can help you get back on the field to play faster, it can help you advance to that next level, and it can help you to get paid more to play the sport that you love, whether it's soccer, football, American football, rugby, track and field. Getting the proper diagnosis allows you to get treatment faster, allows you to get return to play faster, and cuts down on time lost. And in some cases, when you become a professional, or if you are a professional athlete, you're no longer losing money doing the sport that you love. So in part 4, it's going to be divided up into 2 parts on how we can actually defeat shin splints from a strength and conditioning point of view, as well as treatments and other modalities that we can do to eliminate and rehab shin splints. Coach Tony, Wrestling Podium Performance, embrace your potential.